Hey guys, how you doing? Just got back in from Puerto Rico. I'm very excited to hang out. I always look forward to this time of week. I feel like when we get together, we really get to learn together. And for those of you that don't know me or just getting to know me, my name is William Wood. I'm an expert in neuro-linguistic programming. I'm also an expert in hypnosis. And overall, I'm your personal development coach. And so my goal today is really to help you learn the skills that you need to be able to have a deeper, more rich communication with the people around you. So over the last few weeks, we've been studying body language, and we went through, we did probably 10 hours on or maybe 8 hours on the micro expressions of the face. We talked about the different zones of the face, right? For those of you that were here, we talked about the forehead zone, we talked about the eye zone, we talked about the nose zone, we talked about the mouth zone. And then last week, we started the process of talking about NLP movements. And NLP movements are a great way to start to understand the internal processing, meaning the way that somebody is thinking as you're talking to them. And you can literally start to watch patterns. Now, like I talked about last week, we're not going to do a total rehash, although we're going to do a little review at the beginning. We're going to review and then build on what we did. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about NLP movements as I believe that they work. And then we're going to be talking about how you can use that to find out people's strategies, internal strategies. And so there's about 3 pieces that I want to teach you, and I'm going to get through as much as I can today. And anything that we don't get through today, we're going to go ahead and lump into the next time we meet. So why would you want to learn this? This really comes back to body language in general. Why do you want to learn body language? Why do you want to learn eye movements? Because I believe that one of the most important roles we have in communication is the ability to interpret the messages that are coming to us from the outside world. So if somebody's sending you a message, the question is, number 1, do you see it? Number 2, are you interpreting it, and are you interpreting it correctly? The more sophisticated you are in your ability to observe another person, the more ability you're going to have to be able to influence other people. And what I think all of us are doing right now is we're learning how to master our own personal influence. And as you've heard me say before, the most important part of our own personal influence is to be able to influence our own mind and our own heart, to be able to change our beliefs and to take our life in the direction that we want to go. After we learn how to do that, the next most important step is to be able to send and receive communication effectively so that you can persuade, so that you can listen deeply to understand, so that you can really develop deep and meaningful relationships. Now, the techniques that we're going to be applying today, we're going to be learning, I have personally used in a bunch of different contexts. I've used them in personal contexts, at home, mentoring, teaching my children. As I'm talking to my children, by knowing what I know, by knowing the techniques that we're going to be studying today, I can literally tell what my children are thinking, or more appropriately, how they're thinking. We're not mind readers, we're body readers. I can tell how they're reading so that I can match my communication in a way that allows me to get through all of the resistance that might be there, or to get through in a way that they'll finally understand. I've been able to use these techniques with my wife, and I've been able to teach my wife some of this stuff so that she can also understand me better. Why? Because in a spouse relationship, or if you're in a relationship of lovers, or if you're in a relationship with a significant partner, you want to be able to deeply understand the person who's in front of you. And by understanding eye movements and by understanding how someone's thinking, how your partner's thinking, you can better serve your partner. You can better meet your partner exactly where they're at. I use these techniques daily in a coaching context. In fact, the techniques that I'm going to be sharing with you, that I shared with you last week, and the techniques I'm sharing with you today, literally form a foundation of what I do in order to read my clients so that I can best serve them. Over and over again, I'll have clients ask me, how did you know exactly where to press the button? Or how did you know exactly what to focus in on? The way I know how to focus in on things is by learning how to observe how my clients process information, and then learning to see and hear what's most important to my client. And you can tell that through the voice tone, and you can also tell that through eye movements. You can tell that through micro expressions in the face, and then other macro expressions of the body. And then I've used this in a sales context where I'm going out and I'm promoting my business, or I'm looking for speaking gigs, I'm looking for corporate contracts, or even before when I was a full-time sales rep and I was looking to promote the products and services of my company. These techniques helped me understand how I should communicate with the person in front of me and how the person thought. And that's really what we're about tonight. So if you're interested in learning more about eye movements and doing a little review and then building on what we did last time, then let's go ahead and let me know in the comments below and do that. And I'm just going to say hey to some people here that we got coming in. So hey BJ, hey Daphne, hey Judy, hey Gail, Samantha, Cosmos. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Someone let me know if I've got sound here. I'm just going to check here. And West, if you could tell me if you can hear me, that'd be super handy. We got some questions about sound. And how do we access the last few weeks? The last few weeks have had, there was a tech problem for posting them in the back office. So it's an existing issue. We know it's there. And we need to, I think the tech issue has been fixed. And I think all we need to do now is just go ahead and put them up. So they will be up shortly. And maybe if West, if you can give me an idea about when that's supposed to happen in the chat, that'd be great. I know there's probably since like mid-March or something like that, or maybe even February that we're missing the replays. And that's not because we don't have them. It's because there was a tech issue in posting the videos in the back office. So, okay, cool. Yeah, you guys can hear me? Okay, sweet. And yeah, you guys are excited. So I'm looking forward to this. So let's go ahead and let's do a quick review. Now we're going to need a couple of volunteers today. Ideally, I've got a live volunteer here in the office, and we'll bring him out here. Rich, if you want to pop out and just wave at everybody here real quick. So this is Rich.
When you need me, you got me.
Okay, sounds good. We'll bring you out here in just a minute. And then also if we could have one or two more people from our virtual audience pop out, it'd be really handy because eye movements are much easier to learn if we get some experience under us. We started to form a foundation last week. We're going to do a quick review right now, and then we're going to put the next building block on as we start to talk about how we can use eye movements to be able to learn someone's strategy. And we're going to start off with a really simple strategy today, and then we're probably going to be talking strategies for the next several Next Level Masterminds so that you guys can really get a good feel for how to use eye movements to be able to understand the people around you better and learn how you can use them to actually communicate more effectively. Does that sound good? Okay, so let's go ahead and let's just do a quick review. So if you guys are looking at my eyes, I gave you three basic rules last time we met. And that is when the eyes are in the upper range, right? When they're in the upper range, if you see them anywhere up in this range, generally speaking, okay, this is a rule of thumb, not a rule, meaning every single person is a little bit different. But generally speaking, when you see somebody's eyes up in the upper range, if they're moving up there, especially if they're locked in place and defocused, the person is accessing some kind of visual information. So up, defocused, and especially if the head is tilted up and the body language is pretty squared away. If somebody's kind of up here, even if they're just flicking a little bit up, that person is in some kind of visual range. That could be straight up, but more often it's to the right or to the left, okay? So up means, generally speaking, somebody is in their visual range. If somebody is going laterally, especially if they're lateral and they're like cocking their ear just a little bit like they're hearing, the person is probably accessing some kind of auditory information or they're hearing something, okay? So lateral movements, either way, looking at either ear, somebody is usually either hearing a sound, hearing a voice, or hearing something, okay? And again, especially if the ear cocks towards the eye. So if you see the eye cocked that way, or it's even cocked that way, it's like they're like perking up the ear or perking down the ear, trying to really listen in. That'll tell you that somebody's accessing auditory information most of the time. Or sometimes you'll even see the hand pop up and you'll see them kind of look straight sideways like that. And you know right then that they're listening to something. So first rule, somebody's looking up, they're usually accessing visual information, they're looking side to side, they're accessing their auditory information, they're hearing something. And then the third rule I gave you was, a rule of thumb I gave you is if somebody's looking down, they're processing, and they're either processing through self-talk, this would be feelings, they're processing through feelings, or they're processing through self-talk. And if they're doing either thing, you want to give the person plenty of time to process, because if you interrupt self-talk, they can do one of two things. They're either going to stop their self-talk and they're going to look up at you and then they've lost whatever that is. Or if they're down here, they're in their body sensations and they're literally trying to decode how they're feeling so they can feel what their response is, and then they'll look up. So if somebody's looking down, the third rule of thumb is wait for them to process and then wait for the eye contact to come back up. To a lesser degree, that'll happen if somebody's in a real visual mode. But if somebody's in a real visual mode and their eyes are defocused, the visual information is transferred really, really quickly, and you don't need to usually don't need to give people a lot of time to do that. If they're searching all around like this and their eyes are kind of going all over and they're like, let me think about that, they're really just searching for an answer, and they maybe, they're basically pulling out the file drawers, pulling out a bunch of files, seeing what's in there. That makes sense? So those are the big patterns. Now let's go through another pattern, right? Let's go through the other part of the pattern. Generally speaking, if you're looking at the left side of somebody, now this is my left, this will be your right. Does that make sense? So when you're looking at the left of somebody, we're talking about most of the population here. We're talking about rules of thumb, not rules. Remember, every single person does this differently. Like we saw last time, Brian Couch pretty much had very typical eye patterns, whereas Martin Andre had a slight variation in the way he did self-talk. And so, although his eye patterns were pretty normal. Hey, Brian, there you are, man. We were just talking about you. Maybe your ears were burning just a little bit. So good to have you, man. Yeah, thanks for muting. We'll bring you out here in a minute. So if you remember, his eye patterns were pretty normal. So there's a difference for most people between what they do with left access and right access. So when someone is accessing eye movements to the left, it tends to be from lateral to up. It tends to be a remembering action. This would be my left, your right. So if my eyes are straight over to the left, I'm remembering sounds, and especially when I'm looking to the left, I'm remembering voice tone or like a tone, right? So now that, again, that's a pattern. That's what most people do. It's not what everybody does. So when somebody's eyes pop over, you know that they're hearing something, and you know that they're actually tuning in to the tone of the voice most of the time, which is really handy, because if you're asking somebody their opinion and then they look straight over there and they're cocking their ear, they are listening to someone and they are paying attention to the voice tone, which tells you a lot of times that they may be listening to a critical voice. Not all the time, but with a high degree of probability, that's what's happening when they're popping. They're hearing somebody else relay advice, and they're probably hearing the specific voice tone that it's being delivered in. And that, again, that's just right off into the list. Judy, hey, how you doing? Glad you're on. We'll go ahead and mute you for now. Is that all right? I'm going to go ahead and mute you just so we don't get a lot of, hang on. There we go. A lot of feedback. There we go. We're good to go. So auditory tonal, straight across to their left, or as you're looking at me, to my right. Okay. If I'm going straight up, if I'm going down, this is where a lot of people keep their self-talk, especially if you see people do this, or you see people kind of do one of these jobs. This is almost always self-talk behavior, and they're having an internal dialogue in their mind. And again, I don't like to interrupt that. It used to be in the old days that I used to talk to a lot of doctors on a day-by-day basis, and a lot of them have do a lot like a major self-talk strategy. I'd ask them like a technical question, and they would pop their eyes down. A lot of them would touch their chin, and the ones that wouldn't touch their chin, they go, They kind of give a little furrowed brow, look down, and then they pop back up. And then I'm assuming that what they were doing, because when I've checked this is what most people are doing, they would literally repeat what they just said to themselves as they were looking down. Now, not everybody does that, but a lot of people do that. Now, interestingly enough, most of the surgeons that I talked to, they would go up and they would access visual information and then pop down and talk to me. So it's a little bit different by field. And of course, every single person is different in the way that they process, but surgeons, as a general rule of thumb, very visual. Martin Andre, if he's on, I know he used to do a lot of sales in the medical field. He could tell us what he experienced. Maybe he wasn't paying attention. But I either see lots of visual or lots of self-talk, and those are the two main processing styles that I saw. If you're selling in a certain area, or if you're influencing in a certain area, you want to pay attention to the way that most people in your field are processing, so that you can verbally match And then specifically, if you're sitting one-on-one in front of people, you want to notice what representational system people are going to. Are they going to listen? Are they going to see? Are they going to self-talk? And based on what the person's doing, you're going to want to adapt your strategy accordingly, in essence, so that you can speak their native language. Because if not, you're going to do a lot of mismatching, and the person will feel like you're not really understanding them, or you're not speaking in a way that's very clear to them. So I've watched this happen. There's a lawyer that I know, I mentioned him last week, who's very, very, very auditory. He does a lead auditory almost all the time. And he will lead with the very auditory strategy, whereas I've seen him talk to people who are like highly visual, and he's talking about things he's heard, sounds, and he just almost instantly loses people. Had to teach him the strategy so he could round out his communication strategy. So auditory tonal, auditory construct. This is where we're trying to hear a sound or reconstruct a sound. Typically we'll move over to the right. Visual construct, visual remember. Visual construct, I'm trying to piece it together. Visual remember, I'm remembering how it was. What did I see? What did I think I saw? Doesn't mean that the person's lying necessarily if they go up into their right. What it means is they're trying to visually piece the information back together. This has to do with the job of the hemispheres based on what we think, right? Trying to reconstruct, trying to remember. Reconstruct, remember. Up and to the right, which would be up and to your left, is construct. Up and to the left, remember. Now this is also interesting when we talk about time, and this is another little layer that we're going to layer in. Remember I told you we're going to backtrack, we're going to learn, review what we did, and then we're going to deepen. This stuff takes a few times to go through. I know I had to hear it about 6 times before I started to really capture the real feel for it. Not that I didn't understand it, I understood the information as being presented, but I couldn't really do anything with it. So that's why we're going to review it a few times, and we're going to build on it just little by little, bit by bit, until you really start to get a feel for it. So if you got questions, make sure you post them in the comments, and we'll go through them here in just a minute. So again, eyes pop up. This would be what? I want you to post it in the comments. This would be up and to my left, up and to your right. Am I remembering or constructing? Okay, let me just check the answers here. See where we're at. We're going to go through a little test. I'm buffering a lot. Okay, I don't think it's on my end. It may be Brian. I know you're out in Puerto Rico. I think that may be part of it. So if I am up and to my left, up and to your right, what am I doing? Yeah, that's right. Visual remember. Okay, and that's what he just said, right? And Brian, if you Brian Couch, I know you're here. Judy, you're there. If you guys could post in the group chat here, just over on the side, your answers. That way I know that you're following me, because I know there's a little lag with the group. But that's visual remember, right? Yeah, visual memory, you got it. So then if I'm up here, I'm up and to my right or up and to your left, what am I doing? Yeah, I'm reconstructing, or I'm piecing something together, I'm trying to figure it out. And so it's my right, your left. I'm piecing something together, but I'm definitely in visual mode. Now, if you forget that and you get your right and left turned around a little bit, like I do sometimes, and this is a true story. We were just talking about this. Rich has a great sense of direction. I got none, right? You know, I have to do the whole left hand, right hand thing sometimes when I'm turning. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's true. I'm better today than I was 10 years ago, but it's still something that I struggle with a little bit, right? So, right, remember, construct. Okay, what about straight across? If I'm doing like this and I'm cocking my ear towards it, or I'm even cocking my ear up towards it, what am I doing? Okay, this is an auditory remember. So remember, it's remember, remember. Okay. Auditory construct. Okay. Over here, I tend to be, most people who go here will tend to be focusing on voice tone. Rule of thumb, not a rule. Okay. Down here, especially if you get something like this. Okay. Self-talk is typically speaking, people will keep self-talk over on the left and over on the right, especially when you see the shoulders round just a little bit. This is where somebody's going into their body sensations or their emotions, and they're going to process. So real quick, I'm going to go through this fast, and I want you to see if you can keep up. Okay, you guys are doing good. What I'm going to do, all I'm going to do is I'm going to move my eyes, and I want you to do a couple things. We're going to do a little exercise here together, so you guys can practice doing it. Let me grab a pen. You got one? Let's see. I might have one right back here. Oh, you got one? Cool. Thanks, Rich. So let me go ahead and pull this out. Can you have the clipboard? Would that be all right? Yeah, that's fine. Couldn't change that at all. Actually, we'll use this exact thing, okay? So one of the ways that I do this, and we're gonna do a little exercise here together. What I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna pull out a couple of guests. We're gonna pull out Rich here in a minute, then we'll pull out who's in studio with me. Then we'll pull out Judy, and then we'll pull out Brian, and we're gonna have each of them tell a story. Thank you for the backup pen too. I want you to draw a circle with like a cross through it, right in the middle. And this is an exercise to watch the pattern of somebody's eyes, and all it's doing is it's bringing your awareness to what somebody's doing with their eye movements. And I'm just gonna tell a story. I'm gonna actually minimize my screen so I'm not focused in on like looking at anything, and I'm just gonna tell it as my eyes naturally move. I'll have Brian do the same. I'll have Judy do the same. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna put your pen right here in the center. If somebody is looking dead center, this is where we're going to start. And then let's say that the eyes moved up and to the left. What I would do is if they moved up and a little to the left, I would do something like that. If they moved way up to the left, I'd do that. Then let's say that they dropped down, I'd move like that. Does that make sense? So all I'm doing is I'm going to be tracking the movement of the eyes and paying attention to the direction that I see the eyes moving. Does that make sense to everybody? So as I'm watching, I'm going to be looking up at the screen, and then I'm going to be doing, and it doesn't matter if I'm a little off or I'm a little off center, I'm just going to be moving where I think it is. And then when I'm done, I'm going to end up with some kind of scribble gobbledygook like that. But really what it's doing is it's training you to follow the eye patterns of the person in front of you and really pay attention to what they're doing. If you want to get good at body language, you zero in on one thing for like a week. That's what I recommend. So if you're studying the face, for example, you don't study the whole face. You zoom in on the eyes and what the eyes are doing in terms. Remember we talked about like eyebrows raising or narrowing, or eyebrows up, or all these weird expressions. And so you start to pay attention to what the eyes are doing, and you just study the eyes for a week. Everybody you talk to, you're paying attention to the eyes. Next week, all you're doing is paying attention to the mouth. If you're studying eye movements, you're not paying attention to like the surprise or fear eyes. Right? What you're doing is you're paying attention to actually the movement of the eyes so that you can start to track what the eyes are doing. That will help you recognize what's happening when you're talking to somebody, and it'll help you interpret it more quickly if you zero in like that. So everybody go ahead and pull out your piece of paper, right? Hold up your pens. Let me know that you're ready. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. I'll be the first one. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize the screen so I'm not worried about looking at anybody. I'm not going to try to look at the camera or anything. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'll tell a story that lasts like a minute long. It won't be really anything important, and the story doesn't matter. What matters is what are my eye movements doing, and I want you to pay attention and draw your little figure as we go around, and that's going to help you notice the processing. So minimizing. And so I was just in Puerto Rico just like yesterday. I actually got back in at like about 1:30. Yeah, let me back up a little bit. I got in at like a 1:30 in the morning. It was last night. I flew into Salt Lake. I flew into Orlando, and then my plane was delayed. And after my plane was delayed, then I took that plane and I went off to I went off to Salt Lake. My wife greeted me. My itty bitty baby greeted me, and my boy who had just had a birthday. Josh's birthday was Sunday, and I told him because I was going to miss his birthday, what I was going to do is I was going to bring him some gifts. So I brought him like 6 gifts from Puerto Rico. He was ecstatic. He couldn't wait for him, so he drove. School's out now, so he drove all the way down to greet me. And I think he was excited to see me, but he was really excited to get his loot, if that makes any sense. So he greeted me. I gave him his stuff. He loved it. And it felt really, really good to sleep in my own bed. Okay, gonna pause there for a minute. Okay, we'll give you a little break. I didn't talk about what straight ahead usually means, but I'll talk about that here in a minute. And what I want, I'm gonna gotta find you here. What I want, Brian, if you could hold up your drawing and just show everybody. And Wes, let's go ahead and swap over to Brian here for a minute. Yeah. Okay. Nice. Okay, Judy, let's go ahead and swap over to you. If you could just hold up your drawing. Okay, hold it up a little bit more. There we go. Okay, cool. So Brian, go ahead and pop out for just a minute. And yeah, unmute yourself here. And I'm going to mute myself. Yeah, I can hear you. I'm going to mute myself here in just a second. But Brian, tell me.
This is Lolise. And Lolise was, I'm hanging out with her, and she was the one, she drew it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, what did you guys notice about my eye movements, and were there any particular times when you saw me like do something in particular?
I'll let you go first. Yeah.
You were trying to remember exactly what you were doing while you were explaining the things that you were doing, and then you started like after you didn't have to remember, you had the whole picture. You started just like going on and started looking from to the side, like just explaining, like you were listening to something and explaining. So
yeah, that's when I caught the visual in the beginning where you looked up and a little bit to your left side, I guess.
That's right.
And then we were kind of far back, so it was a little bit hard for me to see exactly what was going on with your eyes.
Okay.
And I saw when you most down, I mean, I remember like when you were talking about your itty bitty, right? But yeah, that the one that I caught was mostly like up and to the right when you were, I guess you were, or no, sorry, your left, my right, visually remembering what you saw.
Visual.
Yeah,
you're on the I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. You're exactly right. I was seeing images. I remember last week we were slowing it down, saying, okay, when you moved your eyes up there, what were you aware of? I saw the car from the driver's seat, and I saw my boy in the back, and got like an image like I was there. And I remember looking over at one point, and I was actually hearing the sound of his voice as he was like pulling out the presents and being like really, really excited. And so I like, those are two things that I noticed, and I wasn't trying to move my eyes. I was just noticing where they were going and what was happening. And I noticed I looked down at this point, but interestingly enough, when I looked down, I was aware of an image. So, and I think it was like a feeling image. It was like, this is where my feelings should be, but I got an image there. And usually when something like that happens, that's what we call in my field, that's what we call a synesthesia. A psychologist uses that a little bit differently, but that's where it's like I see and feel at the same time. So I was seeing my baby, and like my heart was like really warm. So yeah, very, very cool. So yeah, you guys did great. Give them a round of applause, right? They did a really good job. Yeah. Okay. Let's pull out. Let's go and mute you guys for a second, and let's pull out Judy. Judy, don't unmute yourself for a minute because there's a lot of feedback between the two of us. I know you're like in Perth, isn't that right? Yeah, you're in Perth, so it must be the lag or something like that between Australia and here. But I want you to just describe a little bit about what you saw and what you observed. And Wes, let's go ahead and put the camera on her. I'm going to mute, and then go ahead and describe. Show it. You can show us your drawing, or you can just talk us through it and let us know what you observed.
Okay, so can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So I was watching, I'm an eyes person, so I always look at someone's eyes when they're talking, and you went straight up the top, and I thought, he's remembering something that's happened in the past, like just recently, and you're looking up there to collect it, and then going side to side, you're sort of listening for, okay, yeah, this bit of auditory, and then definitely when you came down here, you know, that's from the heart. You can see it coming down here. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Go mute your microphone, and let's give her a round of applause. Okay, she's doing good. Okay, so first things first. Remember, I said when you're doing body language, the first thing is to notice it. Even if you can't interpret it yet, your job is just to notice what's going on. That's what this exercise is designed to do. Last week, we were just kind of describing it, seeing what was happening, kind of exploring it. Today, what we're doing is we're first noticing what people are doing as they're like telling stories and going real time. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull Brian back out. So Brian, if you don't mind coming back out, and Wes, let's put the camera right on him. And Brian, I want you to tell some story. If you don't mind, minimize your screen. So you're not really looking
on the phone, but I can
Yeah, that's fine.
I can hold the thing where I can't see you.
Can you flip
You
it
still
around?
see me?
Can you flip it around to the back and have her hold it?
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
That way you're not looking at yourself? It'll make you a lot less self-conscious.
Yeah, good call. Can you see me all right?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay,
So
cool.
just a short story, like 1-2 minutes. And everyone, I want you to pull out your new diagram. New diagram for Brian. And I want you to just
Just
I'm gonna
wipe my eyes and draw that same circle.
You don't worry about it.
Okay. Oh, you want me to tell the story now? Well, what am I telling? So here I am thinking about what story I'm telling. Okay. So today, I woke up and we were going to go to the pool. And I was super excited about the pool. And I would show you right now, but I guess I got to keep focusing on this. But I put on some swim trunks. And I was cool. I was like, all right, well, we're going to go to the pool. I'm going to be able to do these tricks. Thinking about the jumping and stuff because I was practicing my backflips the other day at the trampoline place. Doing some backflips. I actually hurt my fingers pretty bad because I am now in my 30s jumping on trampoline. But anyway, still thinking about that. I go back and then right when we're getting ready to go to the pool, it just starts pouring. And every time I looked out the window, it was pouring more and more. And I think it might even still be raining. And so now when I think about the pool, I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to be able to do any of that stuff. I'm kind of bummed out. Big old bummer. But maybe tomorrow, right? That's my story.
Okay, go ahead and mute yourself. The story really doesn't matter.
I figured.
Yeah, you're doing great. So everybody, round of applause again for Brian. We appreciate you coming out, brother. All right. So what I want to know is what did you notice? If you in the comments here, let me pull up the comments. What is it? Yeah, that's not Sandy. Yeah, that's not Sandy. That's I forgot the name there, but that's somebody else. So notice, what is it that you're noticing in Brian's eye movements? Go ahead and post something in the comments. I'm going to say post in the comments your findings. Describe what you're seeing. Hang on, what you're seeing. Remember, the first part of being good with body language is just being able to actually capture it, to see it. You don't have to correctly interpret it right away. Once you get good at correctly seeing it, then you can start worrying about your interpretation. So, okay, so cool. So let's go ahead and pull out Judy. Judy, what you're going to do is you're going to tell us what it is that you saw Brian do, and just kind of give us a short recap of what you were seeing there, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so when he was talking, he sort of went up because he was remembering what happened. He sort of stayed up there, so he was sort of getting it all. And then he was sort of going side to side and sort of straight ahead along that line. Pretty much stayed there on there. I don't know that I saw him looking down. So he was just sort of saying what was and, going left to right.
Yeah, go ahead and mute yourself for a second. He did flick down, right? I don't know if anybody caught that. He did flick down a couple of times, but it was really fast flick down. He spent most of his time, I would say that Brian spent most of his time in visual, at first it was like almost like when he was like, what should I talk about? Notice he went into like a visual construct where he was like, what? It was like he was trying to piece something together. And then when he started remembering, he was flicking over to visual remember. And then when he talked about the rain, he looked way far over, and he looked way far over. My memory is he looked way far over to his right, and I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, oh, he's looking at the window. So now I'm curious, when you were looking over the window, were you hearing anything, or were you just looking over at the window? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I don't know if you saw me just think about trying to remember whether I was hearing something or not. I didn't actually hear anything in that exact moment. I didn't hear anything like actual noise. Whether looking to the side and remembering rain, I don't think so. But I think I might have also just been looking at where I was looking at the rain earlier. That's right, yeah.
So you were glancing at the window. Yeah. So there's a couple of other things you need to understand about eye movements, and this is a good time to talk about them. And that is that sometimes what people are doing with their eye movements isn't an NLP eye movement pattern at all. And this is where it takes a little bit of discernment. what somebody's doing is they're actually, in their memory, they have put themselves back into the context where they were, and they're actually like, for example, they're looking in their closet and they're like looking at the shirt where the shirt actually is, right? Or they're holding their baby and they're looking at the baby like where the baby is, right? Or in his case, he's looking at the window where the window actually is. Whether or not he was in the same room where the window was, the person, we call it association. The person is fully associated. They're fully in the context in their mind. And then the imagination is three-dimensional. And so they're actually seeing something as if it's like right in front of them. There I am at my dresser. Well, my dresser is clearly not right here, but I can talk about it like it's right here. And internally, I can see it right where it is. Does that make sense? That's not really an eye accessing cue. That has to do more with the ability that we all have to put ourselves into a situation. That takes a little bit of discernment to be able to tell what somebody's doing, which is why it's useful to go and ask like 10 people to tell a story, and then to ask them, well, when you did this, what were you doing? Were you like looking into your feelings? They're like, no, I was looking at my desk, right? And it's like, oh, okay, the person was actually in the memory. One of the things that you'll notice about eye movements is that when sometimes if people have the information like right on the top of their mind, could be auditory information, could be self-talk, could be visual information, could be feelings, but if it's right on the top of the mind, the person will look forward and defocus their eyes. So they won't make any eye accessing cues at all except for to just defocus. That doesn't really tell you what the person's doing. Probably 80% of the time that somebody's doing that, in my experience, they're visualizing, but not all the time. You can't assume that necessarily. All you know is the person knows the information. They're like, what's your name? It's like, they're not going to go, what is my name? Right? They're going to go, Will, my name's Will, right? And they're not even going to necessarily look anywhere. Or like, what color is your wife's hair? Brown, right? And I'm not going to go like looking for the information. When the person needs to go like do a fact check, that's when you start to see the eye movements going. When you see people gesturing and talking about something, they may just be gesturing and actually interacting with that thing in three-dimensional space as if they're there. So if you see a lot of gestures or a lot of placement, the person has just put themselves into a specific context. I was just watching a coaching session with another coach, and the woman was having a trigger where she was looking at her computer screen, and she did this. He says, well, how do you know it's time to get triggered? And she said, when I look at my computer screen. Right now, this is not a visual accessing cue based on NLPI predictions. Does that make sense? But what is she doing? She's like gesturing at her computer screen. She's seeing an image. She's framing it. Right? Does that make sense? So I know I'm adding a little layer of confusion. This is where we're starting to take it up into the next level of understanding so that you can interpret more, interpret better. So if somebody's gesturing at something and looking, they're probably looking. Or if you ask someone a question, they go, and their eyes narrow, but they're just looking straight forward, what are they doing? They're probably looking at something, right? They're like squinting to see. Or if you ask someone to see something and they do something like this, that's not an NLPI accessing cue, but their body language is telling you what they're doing. And what they're doing is they're actually withdrawing from an image. So for example, one of my early coaching successes, this is before I entered my full-time practice, and I was just doing this I was doing it on the side at that point. I was relatively new. I walked into a medical office, and there was a gal who had a rat phobia. And actually, her fellow coworkers were tormenting her by they had this like lifelike rubber rat that was about like that big plus a tail. So like altogether, it was like probably like that long. And they would just hide it in places where they knew she was going to be. And her phobia was so intense that like when she saw it, even though there was a part of her brain that knew that it wasn't real, she would like leap up on the table and she would scream. Now, I have no idea why they were doing that. There's a major like legal liability by doing this, and it was just kind of crappy human behavior. But they all thought it was hilarious. And so I walked in one day and I literally heard like an ear-piercing scream in the back, and like for like 30 seconds. There were like 20 patients in the waiting room. I was like, this is ridiculous. I was like, what? I was like, is she okay? So I was all worried. I checked in with the front desk. I was like, can I go back there? And because I knew who it was just by the scream, I went back and she was like on her desk, and there was this little like rubber mouse on the ground, right? And all her coworkers were laughing, ha 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 ha. And isn't that funny? And I picked it up and I like threw it out of the room, and I was actually kind of ticked. And so I had a good relationship with everybody back there. And I said, come here. And we went into the lunchroom for a minute. And I said, well, what's it like when you see that rat? And she did this. Right? Now, that's not an NLP eye accessing cue, but what's her body language telling you? By the movement of the head, it's close, and it's like right there. And so I asked her, I said, what are you seeing? Because I knew she was seeing something by the way she moved her head, because she was moving away. She like took a little step back from it too. And she said, I see a rat. And I said, where is it? And she said like this. I don't know if you can see, but she said like this in front of her face. And she was making a huge gesture. So it was a giant rat. And I said, I noticed you backed up your head. She said, that's because I feel its breath on my face. Right? So she was making this three-dimensional image like right there as she was talking. Now, I won't go into the whole story, but literally in 10 minutes, we had her cured of a rat phobia by changing what she saw and how she saw it. It was really fast. Basically, what we did is we took the rat and we moved it over here and made it small. Took it, moved it, made it small, kind of like a swish pattern. Took it, moved it, made it small. Took it, moved it, made it small. And then I did a little peaceful place imagery with her, and literally within 10 minutes, I destroyed all of her coworkers' fun, which probably saved a lawsuit in the long run. And they were trying to torment her for like another 3 weeks, but they just hide the rat, and she just like pick it up and throw it because it didn't do anything to her. And they couldn't believe it. They're like, what happened? So being able to observe what someone's doing gives you a direct insight into what someone's doing with their mind, and it gives you incredible power in being able to persuade and to convince and being able to match in the same system. Like if you were talking to somebody and you notice if they're doing a bunch of visual movements or defocusing or gesturing at things and looking at them, sizing them up, you know that they're doing a lot of visual accessing. If somebody's doing a lot of lateral movements or they're looking down, you know how to adapt your communication based on where they're at. Okay, so how are we doing? 7:47. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna bring Judy out. We're gonna do this one more time. I want you to just track the eye movements. I want you to match what she's doing, and I want you to practice observing where the eye movements are going so that you start to get good at following what she's doing. So Judy, I'm gonna go ahead and I am going to mute myself out, and I'd like you to come out and go ahead and share, and then we'll bring Rich out. We'll have him do the same after that, and we'll have everybody have one more practice round. And if that's as far as we get today, that's awesome. And then we'll give you the next little building block on it so that you can really start to develop some skill with this. Like I said, I had to hear it about 6 times before I started to get real comfortable with it. It's one thing to go think through it and go, okay, I know when they're looking over here, let's see, hang on, up and to the right, that would be visual construct, up and to the left. Oh yeah, that's visual remember, right? But then you're slow about it. It's very different to be able to do it on the fly while you're actually watching someone. So with that in mind, Judy, you're on stage. Everybody else take good notes, right? Get your little cross ready. Let's go ahead and
Okay, hi. So my story, I'll tell you about my recent move. So I was living in Yokine, which is just north of the city in Perth, and I decided to come live with my sister who is down south. And it was very traumatic, the moving from my place to come and share with someone else. And so there was a lot of thinking, am I doing the right thing? Am I a failure because I had to go and live with someone else? Is this the right place to be? So, yeah, it was very emotional and still settling in, but I love my surroundings now. They're really great.
Okay, go ahead and mute her out and applause. I know on my end she cut out a little bit, but Brian, let's go ahead and pull you out and let's go ahead and have you just debrief what you saw. She did move her eyes some. She kept her eyes fixed forward a little bit.
Yeah, I saw her move her eyes a little bit to the side and then back. And then when she said, now I like the environment that I'm in, it was like she saw it right there in front of her. I didn't really think that was an eye down movement. I could be wrong, but that's what she said that I'm in, and it looked like she was gesturing that she's in it and seeing it right there that she's in it. That's what I got. What'd you get, Lilise?
I missed some part of her movements, but I did saw that she was just kind of like recreating this scene, And just thinking about it, her eyes went from the right to the left. I'm confused because the way I'm looking at the screen.
Her eyes
But-
went to her right.
To the right, yes.
Our left.
To the right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she kept seeing to the right and her eyes in the middle, not looking up. And then she just looked down a little bit and she kind of like felt comfortable looking down. So when she was saying that she was comfortable with saying or describing the new place, I think. It was kind of like she froze up a little bit. I couldn't hear some.
Yeah, she
what
froze.
she was saying.
Okay, round of applause. So you guys doing good? Let's go and mute you guys out, and then Judy, I want to pull you out. I want to ask you a question, if I can. When at the end, when you said you were comfortable with your new surroundings, you flicked your eyes down and to your left, and then to your right. What do you remember being aware of right then?
My space that I have here, I'm in it, in my space. So, yeah, I'm in my space. I have the house is sort of in two parts, and so we have our own personal space, and so this is my space. I'm in my space. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Again, round of applause here for Judy. Okay, we're going to give the chair over to Rich. One more time, I want you to practice tracking the eye movements. And Rich, any story's fine. It's all fair game. I'll give you about 2 minutes here. Hang on. I'm going to move the camera back over to us, and I'm going to move this down just so you're not paying attention to anything. So just take a seat. Rich has got the hot seat. Everybody round of applause for Rich. And anything goes. Why don't you scooch forward just a little bit?
I'll try to do a good job for you.
No, you're doing great. Just go ahead and tell any story's fine. I'm going to kind of scooch over here. So
Last weekend was Memorial Day, and I took my 3 kids. They're all in about their 20s. I took them to Washington, D.C., and I had not ever been there before. And it is absolutely magnificent. And seeing the World War II Memorial, for example, and listening to like one of the military bands singing the national anthem, it's breathtaking. It's beautiful beyond words. Going through some of the museums, we saw the actual Declaration of Independence. We saw the Bill of Rights and the actual Constitution, and it's incredible, powerful. We also drove segways around, and we had absolutely a great time, and watching my kids drive around like knuckleheads, and I was the biggest knucklehead driving around, and it was a lot of fun. And if you've never been there, I would wholeheartedly recommend it at least some point, and go with a group and admire what's there. And they had a lot of the services because it was Memorial Day weekend, and the just seeing the monuments, the lights, and how important it is and how amazing it is. It's breathtaking.
Okay, round of applause for him, everybody. Appreciate you, Rich. Thank you.
Sorry, I was looking up at Will a couple times.
Yeah, a couple times his eye movements weren't eye accessing cues. He was actually making eye contact with me. But let's pretend like you don't know the difference between that. I was up and to his right. So there were twice, I think, that we locked in. No, that's fine. That's normal behavior. And again, it's something that you want to learn to be able to discern. That's part of learning how to interpret correctly eye movements, if that makes any sense. You've got to actually learn to see what somebody's doing and learn the difference between an accessing cue and when someone's making eye contact, which is like a totally different thing. So again, what did you see? Let's go ahead and pull Brian out first. Brian, I'm going to mute myself. I'm going to West, if we could switch the camera over here. And then just let us know.
Okay, I got that. Pretty obvious here. It was all very much up to his upper left, and then up a little bit to his right, which might have been where that eye contact was. And then another one where he went a little bit more, but I think that maybe both of those, because I did only get twice to his upright. So maybe he didn't visually construct anything. He was just looking at you twice. And then he went up left, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and then one time possibly a little bit over to the left. I think at one point he did say he was listening to something or he heard something around the memorial. I don't remember what it was, but that's well, he heard the band. That's what it was. It was great listening to the band. Might have. I don't know if he was actually listening to it. He heard the band when he said that.
Yeah, let's actually ask you. So Rich, go mute yourself out. Go mute yourself out. When you were talking about the band, your eyes definitely flicked up. What were you aware of when you were thinking about the band?
It was intense. It was an intense sound. It was a choir. It was a military choir singing the national anthem.
Yeah.
And these guys were incredibly. They were all in proper uniform, and the sound was just beautiful. And I was listening to the choir singing.
Yeah. So you were aware of the sound of the choir.
The sound of the choir.
Were you aware of seeing the choir, or was there no image? Either one's fine.
The image is their perfect spit-shined uniforms.
Yeah.
And the perfect, I mean, just that synchronicity of the voice and the way they stood, and it was amazing.
Yeah. So we would call that, again, we would call that a synesthesia, where if he's looking up and he's looking up, it was this way, and he's talking about hearing the band, he's seeing their uniforms and hearing. And so I think there was a flick down, but mainly he was kind of up in a visual range. That's really cool. Okay. Right. So that was an eye accessing cue when he did that. So good job on that, Brian.
Yeah, I think his head was a little bit tilted, almost down a bit when he was, so like while he was looking up, but his head was kind of down a bit. So yeah.
When you see people cocking their, if you could mute again, when you see people cocking their head, almost always they're listening. Not necessarily, but almost always, if they're like tilting their ear, they're tilting their ear to hear. That's a really common body language signal. Not the only thing that's going on, depending on culture, but it's a really common thing to have happen. Anything else you want to add?
I've noticed too that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're on mute now.
I've noticed too that he kind of like went backwards a little bit with his head, like his body and his head. So that's what I've noticed too. He didn't have a lot of eye movements, but he had a few, but it was more like he was just like, when he was explaining, he was going just backwards and with his head, like imagining the scene that he was seeing.
Okay, excellent. Round of applause to these guys. Okay, Judy, let's pull you out and we'll have you debrief, and then we'll go ahead and I'm going to give you guys some assignments for the week to get good at practicing just tracking the eye movements. And once we're good at that, then we can start layering in the next piece for strategies, which will be really useful when you're into persuasion mode, or if you're even just trying to persuade. And what's persuasion? Persuasion is presenting information in a way to someone that's attractive. Does that make sense? So it doesn't mean I never, ever like manipulation. Always go for leaving people choice, but presenting things in a way that's attractive to people. So we'll be covering more of that next week based on eye movements. How can you adapt your conversation to be able to, better help the person in front of you? So with that, Judy, anything else you observed with Rich?
Can you hear me? Yeah. I just thought that he had such a great time, and it was like when he closed his eyes, he flashed. He saw flashed the image, and then he opened his eyes and said what it was, and then he would flash again, and he would sort of go like that. So it was a huge thing for him, and he was just really living in the moment. That's what I got. Yeah.
If we were to ask people, was Rich in it, or was he like across the room describing something way over there? We would say that Rich was in it when he was describing his story. He was right there. And there's a big difference in the way that somebody's body language is going to behave when they're in something versus they're like almost seeing it at a distance, or seeing what we call a dissociated image, which is like an image out there that's detached. People behave really, really differently. So those are another dimension of things that you want to be paying attention to as you're talking about somebody. When somebody talks really clinically, you'll notice that their body language is very different than when they're like talking about, playing soccer with their best friend, or they're on the beach feeling the sun or something like that, and they're really in the memory. So what I want you to write down in the comments is, I want you to write down in the comments what it is that you're learning, by going through this eye movement stuff and by watching everybody. Like, what was your biggest aha? And go ahead and post that down. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and look through the comments and see if there's anything. Okay, someone asks, what happens when he's closing his eyes? Is that left and right and down? It totally depends. Actually, one of the things that you got to get good at if you're with somebody is people will make the same eye accessing cues with their eyes open and their eyes closed. One of the reasons I think that people make REM eye movements, this is my personal theory, there's no science behind it as far as I can tell. It just makes a lot of sense based on what I know about human behavior. When people are dreaming, their eyes are closed, but their eyes are like moving all over the place. And one of the things that I think that's happening is I think that the same accessing cues are in place, and the people are responding to what they're seeing inside of their dream. Their body is literally mimicking at the level of the eye what's happening, what's happening there. And I'm going to comment on your comment here, Judy, in just a quick second. But first, when the eyes are closed, people will still be making the same eye accessing cues. If somebody just closes their eyes and they're looking dead ahead and they give you something, all they're doing is they're closing their eyes to visualize something that's already pretty much right on the top of their mind. Does that make sense? If they're closing their eyes and you see them look up, and you can actually see the eyeball roll around when their eyes are closed, they'll make the same eye accessing cues. So when I've got a client in hypnosis, I can actually watch the client responding to what I'm talking about, and I can watch the eyeball rolling around. And I think that, and usually from my experience, that's been pretty consistent in where the client's looking as to what their experience is like. Now, sometimes when a person gets real deep into hypnosis, they'll start to do like really lateral eye movements where their eyeball will just roll like right to left, right to left, right to left. Sometimes it'll roll way up, and those movements may be a little bit different movements. I'm not entirely sure. I do know that they're typical of hypnosis, and it's something interesting to watch. But a lot of times I'll watch my clients' eyes doing different things that look kind of like REM, where their eye movements are going all over the place. And I assume it's based on the imagery that I'm feeding them, because usually it'll match. If I'm asking them to visualize, a lot of times their eyes will move into the visual range. A lot of times if I'm asking them to feel, their eyes will move down into the feeling-based range. And then I'll also see people having different reactions to different things I'm doing. So eyes closed, eyes open doesn't really matter. When you get really good, I saw a demo actually where somebody was watching eye movements based on the micro movements of the muscles of the side of the face. They were actually watching the side of the head where they couldn't even really clearly see the eyes. And you can still see based on the twitching of the muscles where somebody's looking, and you can actually learn to read eye movements without actually seeing the pupil or the iris, which is really crazy. I can't do that yet. That's like a level beyond my personal skill. I only know one person who's been able to do that. Pretty wild to watch. I've heard of someone who can do it from totally behind someone, but I have yet to see that person to see if they can actually do that or not, because that's pretty out there stuff. But there's what we're saying here is that communication is redundant, and you can learn to watch the eyes, or you can simply learn to watch the little micro musculature of the face that's going to be telling you what somebody is doing, based on where they're at. But for now, don't worry about that. What I recommend you do is for the next week, and I'm going to answer your statement here in a second, Judy. For the next week, what I'm going to recommend you do is actually go out and tell people that you're studying body language. Go find like 5 people, make your little diagram, and just ask them to tell you a story, but tell them that you're watching their hands or something, right? Because if you tell them they're watching their eyes, they're gonna all of a sudden do something very strange, and they'll be looking straight forward and they like won't move. So you tell them, or I'm studying body language of the lips, and I'm doing a little experiment. Can I talk? And they'll be like, oh yeah, you're studying my lips. And they'll be like, oh, weird with their lips. And then you can like watch their eyes, because their eye movements won't be as weird. Or I'm studying your hands, and then you're watching their eyes. And then afterwards you can tell them what you're doing and say, hey, look, I was watching your eyes. Here's the eye pattern that I saw. And then you can ask them, when your eyes flicked up a lot, when you talk about your kid, your eyes are flicking up, what are you aware of? Don't say, were you visualizing? Say, what were you aware of? And then let them tell you. And that'll give you some insight into how people's minds work. Very, very fascinating stuff. So 5 people this week. That'd be like 1, Monday through Tuesday through Saturday. You can do 1 tonight and then just practice it. And by the time we come back, you'll have better awareness of what people's eyes are doing so that we can move into the strategy-based session and learn how we can actually use strategies to be able to feed back information exactly like someone wants to be communicated with. And with that, guys, Judy Gunn's comment, she says, I learned to be looking into someone's eyes when communicating gives you a better connection. Yeah, so you'll go to like body language courses and they'll tell you that when you make a really fixed stare at somebody's eyes, that it improves your body language. And there is some truth to that, but here is a general rule of thumb that I would recommend. Okay, so eye fixation is a dominance thing. If you want to play a fun game, this will be fun for you too. Okay, if you just practice locking eyes with strangers, and make sure you're in a safe place. Like, don't go into a bar and do this. Okay, you end up in a fight, right? Like, really. Okay, so like do this like in a grocery line or something where people are unlikely to take a swing at you. Not in the hood, right? But just if you lock eyes with a stranger, like in the grocery store, and hold eye contact and force yourself to hold eye contact until they break gaze. And mammals establish dominance through eye contact. So the longer you can hold eye contact, the more dominance you are. Here's the thing. You can also seem really creepy by doing it too much. And what you think is connection by just forcing eye contact past its normal range and having like really open weird eyes or something like that can actually create a break in rapport instead of a rapport. So usually what we tell people in eye contact, if your goal is to build rapport, is you match their eye gaze. So if they're locking eyes with you, you lock eyes back until they look away. And when they look away, look away. And then when they look back, look back. It's really easy to do with your peripheral vision. If you do that, that will tend to produce a better connection than by staring them down and forcing them to look away. When you stare someone down and force them to look away, what you're doing is you're forcing them to take a position of submission or a position in the pack of less than alpha. And if you've got somebody who's vying for alpha, you'll watch people even start to get a little aggressive and do like a chin jut and a chest thrust, which is why I don't recommend you do it in a bar. People get a little alcohol in them and they get kind of stupid. So so be careful with that. And eye connection, yes, talk towards someone, but eye movements while somebody's talking is totally normal. And you'll notice that if you start watching people in casual conversation, which would be my second assignment for the week. When you're out talking to people, you're not going to have your paper and you're not going to be doing it formally, but just ask people to tell you stories and watch what they do with their eyes. Everywhere you go, just say, hey, I'm collecting cool stories this week. What's happened that's good to you? Or you're talking to your spouse, you say, hey, what's cool that happened to you this week? Or what's the funniest thing that I like to go home and ask my wife, kind of funny questions, kind of off the wall questions like, hey, what was the strangest thing that happened to you today? Or what's the thing that made you smile? Or what's something that made you roll your eyes today? And just listen for the responses. And then I can, and I may not be watching this consciously at this point, but then I can watch her eye movements as she tells me her story, and I can tell where she's at, right? That makes sense? Yeah, if you're willing to play the game, just go ahead and either raise your hand if you're out here, or if you're at home on the computer, just go ahead and type something in the comments. Love to have you play. The more you do this, the better your communication is going to be, and the more you're going to be able to respond in appropriate ways to people who you're communicating with. So that's it. One more round of applause for everybody. Round of applause for Rich. Appreciate you. Okay, Brian, Judy, thanks for coming out to hang out, and we will see you guys next Tuesday, same time. Bye, guys.